interesting little headline here. I just thought I'd dump this on you guys. Folks, we hear this clatter all the time about climate change. We've been hearing it for decades, and it's really unfortunate because a lot of policy, a lot of folks are pushing for policy changes. They want to shape everything, based on their fear that we're destroying the climate. We're, changing the Earth's atmosphere, whatever. We're going to destroy life on the planet. Well, that's a very atheistic perspective, by the way, because if you know your Bible, you know better than that. We'll touch on that in a moment. But it's a troubling thing, and it's too bad that we have to have these debates, which really, when common sense prevails, there's nothing to even talk about. There's no climate change issue. There's certain seasons that are hotter than others. We have hot streaks, cool streaks, whatever. It's been going on for hundreds and several thousands of years since the global flood. Well, this is an interesting headline. And Brother Ken Ham had some comments about this. He's from Australia originally. And, the headline says, Australia's Great Barrier Reef defies climate doomsayers with record coral comeback. Australia's Great Barrier Reef is an internationally famous icon. I'm sure most people in the audience, Neil, you've heard of it, the coral reef. It's beautiful. It's just a tremendous part of the Earth's geography and so forth. Well, anyway, the colorful corals, variety of creatures, the undulating waves make a massive, jaw-dropping, beautiful environment that can even be viewed from space. Now, I didn't know that. I guess you can see it from outer space.
I did. We went through it, and it was in part of our VBS curriculum this year. That's the only reason I knew.
Well, that's why we go to church. We can learn all kinds of things. All right, so now environmental activists have been saying for decades that the reef is on the edge of collapse. But defying their predictions, the reef just had a record growth year. According to reports, coral cover on 2/3 of the iconic reef, which is seen as a bellwether of ocean health, has reached its highest level since records began 36 years ago. Now, this seems like it should be good news, right? Well, scientists say don't get too excited. The Australian Institute of Marine Sciences, I'm quoting Ken Ham, he's put this article together, said in its annual report the reef is vibrant and flourishing, although challenges do remain for such a resilient system that, quote, still maintains that ability to recover from disturbances, unquote. But the worrying thing is that the frequency of these disturbance events are increasing, particularly the mass coral bleaching events, he continued. Each time the reef has managed to fully recover and generate growth lost to natural challenges as nature's resilience triumphs over natural setbacks. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, which manages the reef, says despite the latest positive news, the outlook for the icon is, quote, very poor due to climate change. Well, translation, writes Brother Ham. Scientists in Australia admit the Great Barrier Reef is doing very well, is very resilient, and the doomsday predictions of the climate change religionists of the past didn't happen, but don't let that stop you from thinking climate change won't destroy it in the future. Look, ever since the global flood, climates have been changing and will continue to do so. Brother Ken says, quote, when I was a high school student in Australia, we were told the reef would be destroyed in my lifetime, but it has not. It's doing great. Ever since the global flood, climates have been changing and will continue to do so. Don't get sucked into the anti-God climate change religion of our present day. Climate change will continue as we live in a post-fall, post-flood world, but regardless, God promises, Genesis 8:22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. You know, Neil, all the doomsday predictors, about the climate, they're always wrong. But in the interim, they want to take us back to the 1800s and have us living in log cabins with no electricity, no heat, no transportation, and all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it seems currently they want to just flip a switch and make everything to their so-called green energy. If you look at the way some of these things are developed, they're not quite so green anyway. That's probably another debate. But I remember, of course, now you're talking almost 20 years ago. In college, there were different things out, and they were saying things That's is '04, '05, somewhere in there. Miami was going to be underwater, and the coast of California. We've seen certain things with the coast of California in certain areas, but not because of that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they're talking the New England where it's on the coast. All this stuff's going to be underwater, and but specifically, I remember them talking about there's going to be like fish down the street in Miami, just running. And I'm like, they have times of flooding.
Maybe for a few weeks after a hurricane, that's the limit on that.
Yeah, exactly. You have some severe events. But their argument was because I think the ice caps were melting. And some have in the Arctic. Now in the Antarctic region, it's been the opposite. They don't talk much about that region because we have, these home bases where we study things there.
Yeah.
And in the last 5 years, I think it was, they can't get their ships in and out because there's too much ice. They have to fly in and out.
Too much ice.
And they used to take ships in there. Now the Arctic's the opposite, but it just goes back to that whole things. There's a
ebb and flow.
There's an ebb and flow, exactly. It would seem that that's always been the way it is, and that it continues to work that way. Certainly, we want to be good stewards, but.
Good point. Yeah, and that's the perspective Christians have. We want to be stewards of the creation and take dominion over it, but we understand God has created planet Earth to be inhabited. He has a plan for planet Earth. Seed time and harvest is not going to stop. Cold, heat, summer, winter. No, that's going to be the general pattern until the Lord deals with the earth. And folks, if you want to be concerned about anything, you should be concerned about the climate change that's going to occur when God arises to shake terribly the earth. Now that's predicted in the Word of God, has nothing to do with men driving automobiles or generating electricity or cutting down some trees. Well, it has everything to do with God's judgment for sin. Well, I hope you're not ever panicked by the doomsday sayers when it comes to the climate. They're way off base. And literally, these dear folks, we love them, but it's like they worship the earth. They don't know the Lord, most of them, and they're just hanging on to this little sliver of hope called planet Earth. It's like we got to take care of it. We're going to destroy it. No, you're not going to destroy it. But it's a lengthy subject. There's a lot of data that comes about here and there. But I thought you'd be interested in this story. Australia's Great Barrier Reef defies climate doomsayers with record coral comeback. And so it is. I sleep well. I know the Lord will take care of us, but I'm more concerned about those who are so off base that they want to practically destroy our economy for fear, gasoline engines, all the rest. It's ridiculous. Fossil fuels are not destroying the climate. I'm sorry. Do the research. Get it all on the table. But we have this back and forth for no good reason. Neil, these debates are going to persist because you have a group of people in the world that don't fear God, and they don't have any faith. They don't know the Lord. And then you have another group that says, wait a minute, what are you doing to us? We don't have to be panicked. We don't have to live in fear. God will take care of us. Let's be good stewards. If we got too much smog, let's do something about that. But let's not throw out all of our heat. I just read an article, folks, not too long ago. People want to, they want to attack natural gas, for crying out loud. I tell you, these people want to take us back to log cabin days and then dare us to cut down a tree to build the log cabin. I don't know where they're going to live in. It leaves your head spinning. Yeah.
Well, and if you look at their own data, if you look at different UN things and these other councils that they have, their predictions 15 years ago, for instance, were things like these climate-related deaths would be so high. And I read an article last year, I'm sure it was last year, early this year maybe, and their argument was quite the opposite. And they were saying, look, because of fossil fuels like natural gas, specifically propane, things like that, climate-related deaths around the world, especially in poorer countries, have diminished drastically simply because people have things like heat in their homes.
There you go.
And they can sustain a winter in an area where maybe they couldn't. And it's literally been the polar opposite.
Everything that's benefited mankind and prospered mankind, it's like the enemy wants to take it away from us, steal it from us. Well, look, we're not going to be quiet about common sense issues. We're going to talk about it, and I guess we'll just have to have our debates. But listen, we can proceed along and enjoy the good things God has given us, manage them well, and make improvements, but we don't have to live in fear. It's ridiculous. I know some, I tell you, everybody ought to take heart about, he's talking about the rising sea levels and all that predicted. That's old news. It hasn't happened. President Obama and his dear wife, they're not worried about that. They just bought him a nice place out there right on the sea, right on the...
Martha's Vineyard.
They ain't worried about no climate change destroying their home.
They're on the coast.
It's just interesting. I find it interesting.